Hello, my name is Selena, and I'm representing the Norwegian Forum for Offshore Survey and Positioning. And together with the Hydrographic Society of Scotland, we welcome you to this live broadcast showcasing three great presentations this evening on February 24th, 2021. I want to just quickly give you a taste of our fantastic financial support. These are the sponsors that make all of our broadcasts, now they're broadcasts, they used to be live events, all of our broadcasts possible. We have one brand new name even on our list this year, which is Ocean Phoenix. So thanks to Ocean Phoenix for joining our family. If you feel like your logo is missing from this, it could be because you didn't pay your bill last year and I removed your logo, or it could be that you just never told me that you want to be a sponsor. We are heartily welcoming all new sponsors and all new interest in joining our organization in the year ahead. In fact, because of our reduced running costs, now that we've moved online during the coronavirus pandemic, all of our sponsorship is now half price in 2021 compared to all previous years. So now's a great time to get on board. Let us know that you want to support our events. We put everything back into these broadcasts the time being, and hopefully we'll be able to have some physical gatherings again in the future. The NOSP board is completely voluntary, so we don't take any remuneration for our efforts, and we are 100% reliant on the contributions of our financial sponsors. So thank you very much for that. And thank you to everybody who took time out of their evening and away from their families to spend some time with us. I hope that you join us, not least in our chat room. I've got it running here on my screen behind me. If you don't have the link for that, you can find it by going to nosp.no. And at the top of the page there, you'll find the link for the chat room. It's a great place to meet and mingle with colleagues, both old and new. You can use the private chat function, the voice chat rooms, or just chat together in the main room together with us. This is also the place where you can post questions to the presenters during the course of the evening. You can use the YouTube comment field if necessary, but I really prefer to get them instead into Discord. That's where I'll be monitoring mostly. And at the end of each presentation, then I'll field those questions directly into our speakers. So that's the place to get in touch either with me throughout the evening or with any of our speakers. We are very welcoming to any new interested people who would like to join us at a future event. Our next NOSP event is in April. It will be in combination with our annual general meeting, which is nowhere near as scary as it sounds. No volunteers are accepted even, so all you need to do is show up, hear about how great we run this program, and how important it is for us to have you, our members, engaged in our activities. So get in touch if you're interested in any speaking activities. Also, I'd be super keen to hear from anybody with opinions in the Discord chat room today about whether or not we should host a summer barbecue in Stavanger. We've thrown this idea around, those of us that are on the board. Normally we do an annual dinner in November. Last year, of course, it was canceled due to the pandemic. This year, we're still a little bit unsure. Will it be possible to do something like that with an indoor wintertime event? And so we've thought maybe it'd be more likely that we would be able to do an outdoor event this summer. But the question is, will people turn up? So if you would use the Discord chat room to let me know your thoughts about this, give me some ideas, then we'll be happy to get something planned so that once again, we can meet and greet each other in person. That's all I have to say. We have three, as I said, great presentations this evening. The first is Kevin from Somara Subsea, followed by Sebastian from SVG Systems, and then Keith from Zopt. So first up is Kevin. He has over 30 years of experience in offshore survey, 15 of them offshore and then 15 of them onshore. He began with Recon survey and moved onshore, including being managing director at CDL. He's been at UTEC and he's been at Aceton before founding Somara Subsea in 2019. So let me just get rid of my terrible slide there and bring my friend Kevin into the show. Hi, Kevin.
Hi there.
You're live. There's 55 people watching us so far. Hopefully some more will be turning up throughout the evening. Okay. Welcome so much. I want to say one thing to you, Kevin, because I received an email from you in connection with planning this, and I love this word that you used, which was circuitous. And I'm American, but I work and I live in another language, and it's so much fun when I run across an English word and I think, oh, that's a great English word. I wish I had an excuse to use that more often. So thank
probably
you.
A local spell check, so
it was great. Thanks for that word tip of the day. Very much appreciated.
Okay, so I'll just make a start. That's all right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Go right ahead.
So thanks for the intro. 30 years, it's a long time when you say it out loud like that, but I'm glad to see Keith is coming up after me to make me feel a bit younger again, so that'll be useful. I'm going to talk to you specifically today on our experience on a particular project with the XBlue DRIC system over a year ago now. But in broader terms, I think the lessons learned are relevant to the application of new technologies and methodologies across the sector. In my own experience, in my early days, I was involved with the setup and testing of the Skyfix DGPS system, for those old enough to remember that. That was back when 4 hours of 4 simultaneous satellites twice a day had us all giddy with the thoughts of never having to troubleshoot pulsators or leaders ever again. I then managed other things, including the trial and integration of the first ever full acoustic streamer positioning system with PGS using the Sonardyne SIPS-2 system back in 2000. And I've been involved with a number of product launches in my role as managing director at CDL. The point I'm going to make, and I'll come back to again and again, is that the same principles apply, and we keep making the same mistakes. And learning from them in terms of innovation and technology is a huge benefit if you plan to innovate, and ignore them will inevitably cost you. So a few slides just on Somara and who we are, and then I'll move on to the project, and then we can get on with things. If it will move for me, there we go. So why does Somara exist? Try to show it on a slide here, but we're here to challenge. So the business itself is, we challenge each other, and we challenge our clients, our technology partners, to understand how we can do it better. How do we perform better? How do we execute better? And really for us, methodology is as important as technology. And the combination of methodology and technology, using that technology in ways that might not have been considered, is absolutely key to what we're trying to bring to the market. 3 regional hubs for Somara, looking after the Americas, Europe, Africa, Middle East, and Asia Pacific. You can see probably too small to read maybe, but a number of project and project location offices in various regions. And we're up to about, I think, 13, 14 business units now, with more scheduled to come this year. So we'll make announcements as and when those occur. Our core values, very, very important to us. They inform the way that we bring our ideas to reality, defines the culture at Somara. Innovation can't really be done without empowering the talent in your business, nor can it be done without collaborative partners. And that means partners that fully appreciate the reward from innovation comes with a degree of risk. So important, I'll come back to that again. And this played out very clearly for us in the DRICS project, which we'll come on to. But importantly on that project, all 3 parties, the main parties involved, which was Somara, the services provider, XBlue, the technology provider, and our end client, everyone bought into the collaboration, and everyone bought into an understanding of the risk and the reward. And that was needed to give us the best chance of success, with a full understanding of those risks that were involved. So technology, how do Somara get involved with technology? Well, really, we don't develop technology as such. We do have an internal development team, but our skill set really is in working closely with technology developers to advise where we, the service company, see the opportunities for that technology to deliver and have a space in the market, often in ways that the technology provider wouldn't have envisaged. It also gives us a chance to influence the development path to meet the client's needs. And there's an ongoing dialogue with the clients. If we can inform technology with some knowledge from those that have to execute with that technology, and again, from the client's perspective, what they're looking to get out of those technology providers, the results of that, then we're much better chance of being successful in terms of innovation. So innovation in terms of unmanned systems and other types of autonomous, and I need to be careful here, unmanned and autonomous are 2 very different things, as is remote, but we're covering off really on all 3 of those factors at Somara, and particularly on this project. Telling the world that you want to challenge traditional methodology and technology is pretty easy, but delivering on it is not simple. This slide is just a snapshot of some of the things that we've tried to deliver or have delivered in the last couple of years, 3 specific projects, all using different technology. The lessons I learned, or we learned, and in the next few minutes that we'll come on to, was specific to the experience in Mexico with the DRICS. But to be honest, of each of those 3 projects, we could have filled a full presentation with the issues and lesson learned in each of them. Not one of the 3 projects went smoothly, and that is to be expected. That's what happens when you put new technology to work in real world projects. I quite like this quote. I found it on the internet. I'm not going to claim it's mine, but innovation is an idea that has been transformed into a practical reality. I think that nails it. I mean, ideas are great. But there can be no innovation, no step change in how we perform anything without an idea. They're important. In the same way that strategy is important. Defining a strategy, though, is easy. Executing the strategy is tough. Turning an idea into reality is how we change the world, and we've all got the capacity to do that in our own way, in our own sectors. So we at Somara, we had 2 ideas of how we thought we could use USV technology to fundamentally change how we delivered a specific project and got a specific result. And so then we, having decided these were the ideas we wanted to go with, we set about putting them into practice and making it happen. So our first idea, just to explain, the use of USV as a force multiplier in shallow water route survey ops. So what we were challenging here was, in the previous year, what we'd done is we developed, or rather we delivered a project, full GTM survey for bathymetry for route survey engineering. We did the entire project with an ROV SV, using an ROV with M3 sonars. It took us about 150 days. It was a very, very long route, several routes to be covered. And the reason for that was that we're very, very shallow water, 10 meters to about 80 meters typically. So a number of wing lines needed for an ROV to be able to cover that, particularly when you get into very, very shallow water. We just thought, there's a smarter way to do this. So our first idea was to make use of a USV to essentially pick up all the wing lines on these route surveys, while the ROV itself was the platform for the simultaneous ops, and it shot the center lines while we picked up the wing lines at a much greater speed with the DRICS system than we could perform with the ROV. So that led us down a very specific path in terms of collaboration with Kongsberg. So we needed to understand, right, we need to produce the same deliverable with this technology. So the sensor is going to be important. Which echo sounder do we use? How do we get the right technology here that's going to deliver the same quality of end product for the client, which is what they're looking for? They don't care that we got there in a different way, whether it was more efficient or not. To be honest, it's a lump sum job for our client. They cared about the end deliverable. And by working with the technical team at Kongsberg in Norway, we eventually came up with the best solution, which was to use a 2040 echo sounder with a dual ping card. So we needed to double the data density along the track. And at that point, we saw that the data quality that we were getting was going to be acceptable to the client, and we could merge it with the data quality that we were getting from the ROV on the center line. What it did show us was that we were good with that data quality and density to about 80 meters of depth with the USV, up towards 100, not as good. Greater than 100 meters, we had too much loss of data density for this to be an applicable solution. But luckily for us, and we had this idea going in, about 90% of pipeline activity in Mexico is in less than 100 meters of water. So that made it a very viable option for us. Second idea that we wanted to take a try on, because we were going to have the USV system in the country and on the project already, was to use it as a force multiplier, as a way to do SimOps and trenching. So what do I mean by SimOps and trenching? So just to explain, typical pipeline trenching activities with a jet trencher is you trench the pipeline to get a certain depth of burial. At the end of that trenched line, you don't understand what the depth of burial is. You need to get to a certain depth. In Mexico, that's 1 meter to top of pipe. So you pick up the trencher, you go back around with the vessel, and then you survey that trench. You do an as-trench survey line. Did you reach the depth required? Possibly not. And certainly in Mexico, not. We were doing up to 6-7 passes on some of these pipelines. So you spend the time, vessel time, doing that trenching activity, that survey activity. Tells you you're at 0.5 meter, for instance. Right, need a second pass with the trencher. So trenching system back in, run the second pass. Did we get to the depth of burial? Don't know. Pick up the trencher, go back, survey the line. So that's the cycle, a very, very inefficient cycle for a very large asset. So we wanted to try and survey as we trench, which brings a kind of catch-22 situation with you. So you can have the ROV in the water close to the trencher, and then you have full positioning on the ROV, so you can survey as you trench in that way. But you're too close to the trencher. There's too much debris in the water column to give you good quality of data, which is the fundamental issue. You solve that by putting the ROV as far back as possible, and it brings its own problem. This is where the catch-22 is. So you put the ROV back as far as you can to get out of the debris. Now you've got good quality sonar data, but you've no USBL position because you're so far behind the trenching vessel in such shallow water. So the solution that we wanted to try, and we'll come on to the success or not of these at the end of the presentation, what we did, or what we wanted to do, what we executed is we put the ROV 140 meters behind the trencher on the vessel, way out of USBL or usable USBL data. And then we sat the DRIX above the ROV with a gap system. We had XBlue actually write as a follow me subroutine for the DRIX. So we actually DP'd on the ROV. So way hugely back, very good quality of data in terms of the sonar data. And then we got the USBL position for that ROV from the DRIX, which was sitting in a DP circling mode above the ROV, and then telemetered the position back to the vessel of where the ROV was. And the thinking, the theory, the idea was that would let us simultaneously survey as we trench in that manner, cutting out all of those circuitous and required separate survey lines. So that's what we tried to do. We had a good go at both of them. And what did we find in terms of issues? So I think I'll go through a few things here. I'll talk about the success, as I said at the end. But I think it's worthwhile just saying, before we get into the details of some of the issues that we did run into, the DRIX had been around for a couple of years before we took it on this project, but I think it's safe to say that no one had really put it through its paces like we did in this project. I mean, this is full ops, 24 hours, rough seas, multiple weeks at time, real project pressure. And we knew that going in. We knew this was going to be an issue, that no one had actually put it through its paces like we intended to do. We went in with our eyes wide open. We tried to mitigate as much of the risk as we could. But at the end of the project, and I gave a presentation to the XTEX conference, the internal conference at XBlue, about this, we had a total of just over, I think, 30 requested improvements for the system from the lessons that we learned, covering a number of the issues, the titles you see there around logistics were really lessons for us to learn, but there were lessons certainly on the electrical design and survey capability side for XBlue. That I won't go through that full list of 30, but I'll touch on a few from each heading. But definitely worth mentioning, all resolved by XBlue, and I have to give them some kudos here. A large majority of those issues were actually because we were on project for about 3 months, not in the water for 3 months, but we were delivering the project for about 3 months. Many of the issues were resolved between ourselves and the team at XBlue while we were still on the project. And those that weren't resolved during the project timeframe itself were resolved, I think, within 2 months of the return of the system from XBlue. So every single one of those 30 requests that we asked for have all been implemented and taken care of in future designs and improved on the existing DRIXs as well. So they deserve a bit of credit for that for sure. So logistics issues, this is just lessons to learn as a survey company trying to deliver with a new bit of kit. Our vessel audits probably weren't the best in terms of just suitability for the DRIX system. We could have done a bit more in terms of just understanding deck layout. We had an issue with the marine diesel quality. Again, a bit of foresight and planning might have dealt with that before we had some issues with the quality of the diesel that was getting put into the engine. Caused us a couple of problems on site. And lack of spares, we thought we'd done a good job on that, having enough spares to see the project through. But when you're in a frontier location, you can't have enough spares, and we did have some things go wrong that nobody, including XBlue, expected to go wrong, and that required us to get spares back out to site at kind of fairly short notice. So few issues on logistics. Survey, we had a very specific and very difficult issue to solve with the GPS corrections on the DRIX. It caused us huge issues in the project. What we were actually seeing was stepping. We had a very flat bottom on one particular route. It was the first route we were doing with the DRIX. And what we were seeing was very pronounced steps. So steps that couldn't be hidden, if you like, in the data because the bottom was so flat. So you could see these steps, these artifacts in the data. and we tried everything to resolve them. We had land GPS stations set up, we had post-process corrections for the GPS, and then finally we solved it. We solved it by putting the DRIX on the dockside and running it just stationary with its GPS corrections enabled and just logging it. And actually the problem was the GPS correction service. This particular service, which actually had not been tested or tried either by XBlue or ourselves previously, so lessons learned in that in itself. It was a new service, I won't name the company. We saw that we were taking sometimes up to 90 minutes to lock on to a full DGPS corrected signal. And those steps were very, very pronounced, that we could see it happening when the system was stationary on the dockside. So how did we resolve it? We changed the corrections provider. We moved to another corrections provider, and it solved it instantly, but only after a few weeks of problems and a lot of reprocessing of data. So just finding the root cause of some of those issues and being quite prescriptive about how you troubleshoot certainly pays dividends. But we got there in the end, but it was a significant issue. Some data quality issues at lower speeds with the DRIX system. It's really designed to go very, very fast. It makes it very, very efficient, but that's not always what you need in certain scenarios. So around assets, offshore, and also in shore approaches, you want to be able to go slow. There's a requirement for that on occasion. We've actually worked on a solution for this with XBlue. I can't talk about it just now, it's under NDA, but we do have, and XBlue do have a solution for that, which we're pretty happy about. Design issues, really more lessons learned on the XBlue side. We had leaks into the fins compartment, causing us to have to put a separate fins into the system. Just design there on the photograph, if you can see, once you put a gaps into the DRIX system, and then if you set the DRIX inside, this is being resolved, and you set the DRIX inside the DDS, the gaps is actually below the bottom of the DDS. So you actually have the gaps would be touching and being damaged on the deck of the vessel in that scenario with the gaps on the gondola retracted. So we dealt with that on site. We had to put some other sections of support in there to raise the system up to allow us not to damage we didn't damage the gaps, but it was certainly an issue that needed to be dealt with. A number actually of electrical issues, again, I think just due to the maturity of the system not being used at sea in the way that we used it. So splash water on you can see the manual control system there in yellow. So we had some timing issues from the fins, which we had to deal with when we put the replacement fins in. It wasn't quite working in terms of the timing. It was causing us some issues in terms of data processing. But that electrical control, remote control system, we had a failure on the 24-volt alternator. We had injure starter failure, which was caused by a firmware issue, again resolved on project. Water ingress on the wire inlets. Just typical problems that you're going to find with technology that's not been put through its paces in fairly rough offshore conditions. All resolved, but certainly issues that had to be dealt with. And then there was the surprise, which I think always happens, and it's always a surprise. So we went out with what is a very mature recovery system, the DDS, for people that have, I should have a better photograph of it than the one that you can see there. But it's basically a Lars for the DRIX. So it sits in the water, and the DRIX itself drives into this Lars called DDS and locks in, gondola retracts, and you lift out the water. It's actually a very neat solution in terms to launch and recovery. You can see it there in the sky underneath logistics. That's the DRIX itself inside the DDS. But the surprise was, and we didn't think about it until we were on site, the DDS is designed to recover the DRIX while the mother vessel is traveling at speed. So you need that forward motion to allow the DDS to have the correct attitude for the DRIX to drive into it. We were working from a trenching vessel on DP, so we didn't have any forward speed. So we didn't have a DDS that was automatically pointed in the right direction to recover the DRIX from. And we dealt with it on site, and since then you can see there underneath the surprise, that's the future solution. The use of whips actually works very well. If you can have a whip on either end of the DDS, it allows you to hold the DDS in the right attitude to recover the DRIX. But significant problem for us logistically on site when we were using from the trenching mother vessel. So that's a snapshot of the lessons learned. Like I said, there was over 30 all dealt with, but if I'm honest, we went in with our eyes wide open, which I think is the right way. And then we were knowledgeable that we were going to see these type of things occurring. So we managed to work our way through most of it. But at the end, you've got to ask yourself the question, which is, did we succeed? And was it worth it? Was it worth the effort? Was it worth the pain to get through? So of our two ideas, we can deal with trenching SimOps for survey well trenching. And I think it was a hit and a miss, if I'm honest, in terms of success. So the concept was a success. If you're looking at that graph there, if you see the red line and the black line for depth of burial, the red line is the depth of burial that was produced from the data surveying as we trenched. So that's with the ROV on the long layback. And then the black line is 24 hours later, a full as trenched survey line of that same pipeline over that same piece. And you can see the data is constant. So from a proof of concept perspective, we absolutely achieved SimOps with trenching. And actually in the last month of operations, we put this into full practice and we saved 30 to 40% of the vessel time on the last month of trenching operations, which was a massive success for the client. I think what we did learn though, particularly with the DRIX system, it's not suited to DP type activity. So it's the wrong form factor to be used in this type of configuration. And we look at that a lot. When we looked at USVs, we didn't just pick up the phone to Explore. We did an assessment of all the USVs that were on the market to try and understand what was the best system that was going to solve these problems for us and put these ideas into practice. And I think we got that part wrong. So the form factor for the DRIX doesn't suit sitting above a stationary object or a slow-moving object like an ROV. What we had to do was the DRIX itself was DPing in a circle at high speed above the ROV, and that wasn't the best for the quality of the USBL data that we were getting from the DRIX. So proof of concept, excellent. Was it a success for the client? Absolutely. Would we do it that way again? No. But actually, funnily enough, the solution that we have for the DRIX system itself for shallow water and slow moving operations actually fits the solution as well. So there is a fix there for the DRIX to be used in this sort of mode in the future. Our next step for this, we really want to move to take this solution a bit further in terms of SimOps, but it's to do with AUV. So we want to try and move towards a hovering AUV to replace entirely the ROV plus the USV. So we've got some trials going on with that in the next month, just to mature that solution towards that type of operation. We just feel that 30–40% of vessel time is not something to be sniffed at. So we're going to keep trying on this and trying to improve on that solution for SimOps for trenching. And then our main project, if you like, our main idea where we use the DRIX in most of the days on the project was really on the route survey and delivering on efficiency savings. And despite the difficulties, despite the effort that was put in by all three parties, I think we have to say it was a massive success. And it could have been a failure. And I think that's one of the key points I want to get across here is, without a supportive client, without a supportive product developer in Xblue, this could easily have been a failure. In the first 2-3 weeks, we had a number of issues. And if we didn't have the support of the client, and if we didn't have the support of the product manufacturer, and if we didn't have the support of our team offshore, it would have been easy to throw in the towel and just move back to standard operations. But we persevered, and that understanding of risk and reward, because the reward was potentially huge, and everyone bought into it. And that's what made the difference. So we learned so much on this project about the use of USVs. Xblue learned a lot about their system, which allowed them to improve it massively. So there was a huge win for us in terms of experience, a huge win for Xblue in terms of maturing their technology, and a big win for the client. I mean, if you just look at the stats there, we did a calculation, and BP were kind enough to lend me their calculator for carbon footprint from use of marine diesel. We had about 45 days of operations to do the wing lines, and we expended about 4,050 cubic meters of CO2 with that fuel. Doing that same operation with the ROVSV as we'd done the year before would have been 200 days and 4.7 million cubic meters of CO2. I think we all recognize now the environment is something we need to take recognition of in terms of delivery or services, and anything we can do to drive not just efficiency in terms of time savings, but reduction in carbon footprint it should be an aim amongst most service companies working in the energy sector, all service companies working in the energy sector. So huge success in our opinion, and more than 100, I would say 130 plus days saved of ROVSV time. So an absolutely massive saving in terms of fuel, but in terms of cost saving for the client as well. So what are we doing next with USVs? We've got an internal route to autonomy, and we're dedicated to delivering on this. And we've actually set up a full department now. So we've just recently appointed Andy Docherty as our autonomous and remote systems manager. He has a team that's working with him, because planning and execution with this type of technology is massive. If we fail to execute well, the setbacks will be very wide-ranging, not just for Somara, but for the use of the technology in the market. So I think it's of such potential. We want to invest in seeing it succeed, and hopefully others will follow. We have USV projects actually in 2021 in all 3 of our regions. So we've got a project in the Gulf of Mexico, we already have a project in Europe, we have a project commitment in Taiwan already, spending time going forward in 21 working on maturing over the horizon ops. So that's the use of USVs without the need for a mother vessel. We're developing our own capability in terms of automated data processing on platform, so on USV, so that we're not having to send large sets of data back over the cloud or over the satellite. We were successful, I don't know if people might have seen the press release, but we were successful in just at the end of 2020 in being awarded a feasibility study grant by, it's a combination of DCOM North Sea and the European Space Agency. So we've been given a grant in 2021 to do a full feasibility study on the use of over-the-horizon USVs plus ROTV capability. So how do we use an unmanned and actually on mother vessels USV at site, towing sensors and delivering usable deliverables and replacing a survey vessel, manned survey vessel in its entirety. By the end of 21, we will have put forward a feasibility study that might lead to actually a much larger commitment from the European Space Agency to turn that into an actual solution. So we're quite excited about that. And really, we're just committed to developing and broadening the USV offering. With towed sensors capability, we've some stuff going on with UXV. We're working with XBlue on a specific towing solution also. We've actually got some very, very nice technology with some other people that we're working on in terms of those MOUs on moving towards UXO, which I think some others are chasing, but we're actually chasing a solution for UHR. And then hopefully after that, 2D UHR from USVs. We think it's possible. We think within a year or so we can be there. So we're going to keep trying to push the envelope on this stuff. So lessons to learn from this type of execution. There's our lovely DRIX system offshore Mexico, very close to a platform. But collaboration, I can't emphasize how important this is. And not just collaboration at the outset when everybody says, okay, yeah, we all sign up to this risk. It's the culture and the parties. So the services company ourselves, the technology provider, and the client, that culture is important, because it's easy to say you're all collaborating at the start of a project. It's when things go wrong that the culture becomes important. Design stage and testing stage, but if you're going to deliver successfully, everybody has to be on board with this. It's too often we have clients that are pushing us to use new technology, but they don't want to take any risk. And it's fairly untenable. You don't get that step change without someone taking the risk. So finding the right partner that you want to work with new technology and innovation is absolutely key. Management of risk, absolutely. Just expect it. It's going to happen, but expect it. Use your experience, use what you've learned in the past on other projects, and do everything you can to mitigate it. But don't think it's not going to happen, because it will. And eventually, the ultimate success is that it must deliver. So new technology for the sake of something being smart and clever is of no use in a commercial environment in this sector. It must deliver. There has to be an end product. It can't be about how smart the tech is. So it has to deliver technically, but it also has to deliver commercially. And I think USVs is absolutely part of that solution. So I'll say thank you to that. I think I've hopefully not gone too far over my time, Selena, and then I'll just put it on to maybe I don't know if this video will play, but if it plays while the questions come up, this is our system, the DRIX system from XBlue, following our small mother vessel for a shallow water scope out of the port of Costa Calcas in Mexico. So I'll leave you watching that if some questions want to come in.
Sorry, I was on mute. I was going to say, Kevin, I dream of Mexico, so you're killing me. I don't want to see your footage. It has been too much for too long, stuck at home. That looks beautiful. All right. Well, I have a couple questions here. Both of them are from Walter in the chat room. He is my hero every single online event we have had. He's my question answering hero. So thank you, Walter, for participating as actively as you do. Let's see. The first question I have is, can you explain how the GNSS DGPS correction issue, which is usually a horizontal problem, manifested itself largely as a stepping or vertical issue?
Yeah, I think it was probably in all axes, Walter, but really manifest because the seabed was so flat. It was absolutely flat. That it was the heighting is really where it showed up for us. And it was very, very specific that I'll be honest, we didn't spend a lot of time trying to go back over what was wrong with the system and, the corrections that we were using. But certainly it wasn't, as far as we could tell, it wasn't the GPS receiver itself. We switched to another corrections provider and the problem disappeared instantly. I mean, it took us a couple of weeks to get there, but it was very, very noticeable in height. I'm not saying it wasn't also evident in X and Y, if you like, but it was height changes of literally 5-6 centimeters. And because it was so flat, it was manifesting itself in the charting. So it was very, very difficult to process your way out of it. We could see it was real, so we had to deal with it.
Awesome, great. I've got one more question I've got to read from my other screen, so forgive me. It says, Subsea 7 and BP used the ASV for pipe-lay touchdown monitoring in Egypt a few years back, which was a similar concept. It allows you to follow a pipe-lay trenching system much further behind the normal USBL window. But it was not hugely successful as the unit struggled with stability, small vessel even in 1 meter significant wave seas. How was DRIC stability for good quality bathy data collection in shelf water depths?
You can actually get some data from this on XBlue. So they've done as part of our due diligence on the system. We got into this with XBlue and others actually. And one of the key reasons actually we ended up going with the XBlue system was its capability in weather and seas in particular. So I think, I don't want to name every system, but we predominantly found anything above a significant wave height of about 1.3 really struggles to deliver data quality that's acceptable, certainly from a multi-beam perspective. The XBlue DRIC system is really where it excels. We've seen excellent data collected in significant wave height over 2 meters. And I think it outperforms the majority of survey vessels. And so that, from that perspective, I've got a very high degree of confidence that the DRIC system itself can perform very, very well in weather, even exceeding 2 meter significant wave height. And I think XBlue on their website, I think you can download a white paper where they put the system to sea in very significant weather, and they produced a full report to show the results from that.
Yeah, great. Well, we have a couple people from XBlue I know in the chat room, so I'm sure they'll be happy to answer questions about the DRICs. And perhaps if you have a few moments before you have to dash, Kevin, you also could join the chat room to see if there's any follow-up questions on your presentation. Thank you so much for taking time all the way from Glasgow. Now we're going to jet on over to the French Alps and welcome Sebastian into the program. So thank you very much, Kevin.
No problem.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Sebastian. You are live from the French Alps, which I'm not as jealous of as Mexico, but you showed me a view out the window and it also looked okay.
Yeah, that's nice. Actually, the weather is just like summer, so very nice.
Yeah, which I like to hear because I try to be a nice person, but I really don't want to hear it because I'm very concerned about my own mental health at this stage.
Okay, so thanks. First of all, I would like to thank you to all these wonderful and nice organizations and nice stuff. Was very well organized. So thank you very much. Then,
all right.
So we're gonna discuss about the MEMS technology. So we're gonna discuss about the MEMS technology presentations and hydrographic applications. So as you will easily understood, we are a French French company. That's pretty easy to understand with my accent. We are based near Paris. We have two subsidiaries, one in the US and one in Singapore. We have more than 700 customers worldwide, and we sell more than 25 inertial sensors in the field. What we are making, we're making orientation, stabilizations, and navigation solutions. Then let's talk about me. So I'm the senior sales engineer for marine applications. I've been I joined the company 2 years ago, and I've been doing surveys for more than 15 years. All kind of survey in West Africa, IMR jobs, construction jobs, survey jobs worldwide. So now let's talk about MEMS. So MEMS stands for Micro Electronical Mechanical Systems. It has been developed quite a long time ago, developed early 1960s, and the first commercial use was in 1980s for automotive airbags. So there is quite a lot. The MEMS activity is booming worldwide. More than 1 or 2 billion MEMS sales in 2019. Why we use MEMS? Because it's smaller, it's highly shock resistant, so it's able to handle quite a huge shocks everywhere. It's low power, low consumptions, maintenance free, and robust. That's what we can see. You can have a look to on the pictures. You can see how it's designed inside the MEMS. So you can see it's very so there is one fixed plot and one moving plot, and this is giving you the MEMS. So we are gonna just talk about the wording right now. An accelerometer plus a gyroscope is what we call an IMU. An IMU is 3 accelerometer, 1 on each axis, and 3 gyroscopes for providing rotations. So both of that is what we call an inertial measurement unit, an IMU. If we combine an IMU with a Kalman filter, you get a motion reference unit or a vertical reference unit. So basically, you take your gyroscope, you put your accelerometer, you integrate it, and you get the altitude. And you take as well the accelerometer, you put that in the Kalman filters. Then you compute the roll and the pitch. And obviously, it's used the gravity as vertical reference. That's nice, but for example, there is quite a lot of error during dynamics. So for example, if you are moving quite fast, the system can lose the gravity detections and all your measurements are bad. Motion reference units plus external sensor is an inertial navigation system. So you still have your IMU on one side that's going to be integrated several times to get the positions. You can have the gyroscope integrated to get the attitudes, converted to the navigation frames. Then that's, as it's integrated several times, it's going to drift very fast. So we need to stabilize that by using a third-party system. So that can be DGNSS or any other sensor that can provide extra information. So for example, you can provide DVL to get information about the velocities, okay? And that means as well, if you lose one of such sensor, you still be able to output attitude, positions, and velocity for a certain amount of time. And this amount of time is going to be linked with the accuracy, with the specification of the IMU, more the IMU and calibration. So we have developed quite a lot of solution for hydrographer. So we have all-in-one sensor, we have solutions, complete solutions, and we have software and services. We're gonna see each application got its particular product. So we're gonna see that afterwards. So for example, so we got for us that if there is somebody that doesn't know SBG product range, we got the Ellipse, we got the Equinox, and we got the Apogee product line and the Horizon. So we have everything all in one for an easy integration, USV, BOY, and so on. And we got survey dedicated solution for surveyor. So that's mean that it can be easily put inside a survey vessels to have the better performance. Let's talk a bit about performance. So the Ellipse range is the entry level, so they're going to have a roll and pitch of 0.1, and dual antenna heading about 0.2 degrees, and eve 5 centimeter eve. So we recommend such application for single beam echo sonders or for navigation solutions for small drones or stuff like that. Then we go to Equinox, Apogee, and Horizon. So Horizon is our really our high-end product, which is 0.007 degree of roll and pitch, and heading about 0.01 degrees, eve 5 centimeters, and delayed eve about 2 centimeters. So all that products are made of MEMS, except the Horizon for the gyroscopes, but that's all are made of MEMS. Let's talk about some use case. So about the all-in-one sensor. So first of all, I would like to thanks Maritime Robotics. We share with us tonight some pictures and some informations because they used to have our products in their drones. So Maritime Robotics is a solution provider for autonomous technology located in Trondheim, Norway. And they use our products for navigations and surveying applications, mostly for georeferencing of multibeam. So they choose us for several reasons, mainly for the small form factor, the low power consumptions, it's affordable, it's embedded RTK, it has a dual antenna and DVL output to get the better results. And it's easy to configure. So you see exactly we have they use the products in the Ultra Pro USV and also in the Mariner. So you see the small Equinox which is integrating in their USV. The solution for hydrographer, for what application? So that's for high accuracy, very demanding survey. So that can be mainly because it's embedding RTK or PPP. It has a subsea enclosure, so that can be put it close by the multibeam on a pool or on a pole as well. There is no export restriction. Most of you know how it's complicated to send an ITAR product worldwide. It's a really nightmare. With our product, with the MEMS technology, there is no export restriction. So it's very easy to mobilize a vessel worldwide. There is no problem. And this is the use case I would like to show you. One more time, I would like to thanks Hydro Charting, which shared the data with me tonight. So these are data acquired in Greenland in October with the Air2 Sonic 2024 NavSite Apogee and the data post-processed with Inertia. So you see everything from shallow to deep, very clean and smooth data. Most of our product got multi-frequency survey grade GNSS receiver, L1, L2, and L5. Multi-constellations and RTK as well. Our products are fully compatible with most of the multi-beam available in the market, from R2Sonix, Kongsberg, and Teledyne. It's software compatible with Quincy, IPAC, and PDS. Let's talk about the interface. So we got quite a huge range of interface. So and all the way from synchronizations. It has autonomous calibrations. It's provide delay yield and a data logger as well. If you want to have a look, we have done many trials in Hamburg, which is a very demanding environment, which is something in between the urban canyon for the marine application. You can see there is very high height wall everywhere. There is bridge, there is everything. So you can have a look to all the bathymetrics results on our website. I don't want to go too in details, but because we're gonna spend quite a lot of time on that, so no, we're gonna have a look to the data and let's discuss that if you have any questions. No, I think it's good to talk about what we recommend, what product we recommend for what kind of operations. That's good to know, because you don't want to buy an overkill product which can be costly for your operations. So it's very interesting to know. So here is the tab from OpenSky, which is the most easy stuff for surveying, to Arch environment. What we call Arch GNSS environment is where you can have a lot of multipass effects, just like jetty or harbor or bridges. That's what we call very Arch GNSS environment. That's where your GNSS, that's where you lose GNSS, and that it's almost impossible to do GNSS only survey. So you see, with an Apogee, you can even do with Apogee and post-processing, you can do Arch environment survey, just like what we saw before in Hamburg. That's going to be you will be able to get accurate results. We thought that making only MEMS products and INS was not enough. We thought that providing post-processing, it's an important added value. So we launched 2 years ago Inertia. That's our post-processing systems. So it's able to tight coupling INS solutions and GNSS. So that's going to do the tight coupling. That's going to take the raw IMU data, the raw INS, the raw IMU data, the raw GNSS data, and the raw base station as well, to get a tight couple solutions. One thing it's open to, we have an open format, open to everyone, so that can be able to import their own data coming from a third-party sensor inside Inertia to do post-processing. Why using post-processing? Maybe some of you are already using post-processing, but for the one that are not used to do post-processing, I will give you some insight. The post-processing that clearly can save the day, save the job. You see in the previous presentation from Somara that GNSS issue, and that has been, as far as I understood, solved by using GNSS post-processing. So that's exactly the same here. If you have any issue with GNSS, with your INS, or if for any reason you lose the RTK or you lose the PPP, you can be able, with post-processing, to compute that again to able to give you the best accurate solutions. That's going to also remove all the strong multipass effects that you can have. So I don't know if you can see the screen, but on the trajectory under the bridge, so all the yellow dots are from the GNSS only, and you see it jumping everywhere, and you are not able to have the correct trajectory. With the post-processing, all that stuff are removed, and you have a nice and smooth trajectories. It also gives you the possibility to get free PPP, so precise point computations for free. It automatically recalibrates, compute the lever arms. So for example, if the surveyor did some mistake, put a minus or a plus or something like that. So usually what you have to do is to redo the survey because your lever arm are wrong, so the correction are wrong, and you will see some nasty stuff on your multibeam data. By using post-processing, you can redo that, and you can output clean data. So basically, that's gonna save your day. That's gonna save costly mob and demob, and that's gonna probably save you the face with the client, because you don't have to come up and say, look, you have done some issue and we have to do it again. So that's a good point. You can even post-process only GNSS. We have implemented a virtual base station algorithm, so you can we're gonna discuss that later on. And you can also, of course, easily import your base stations. In terms of export, you can export SBET. You can export any other ASCII user configurable file. We have launched this year virtual base. So virtual base station is available at no extra cost in Inertia. So if for any reason you are far away from a base, the system is going to automatically compute a virtual base close by your survey, and you will be able to have the best accurate data you can have. So you can output public base, you can input public base, your own base, the base with different datum. Basically, the system gonna make his own virtual base, taking account all that parameter. So that's gonna easily solve your all the issue with the datum and so on. Everything gonna be automatically choose. The system gonna automatically select the right base stations, the master base stations. There is nothing to worry about. It's almost fully automatic. You just have to validate your network and you are good to go. Let's talk about what we gain with post-processing. So for example, let's take an Equinox and an Apogee. So you can see in real time that Equinox is about 0.02 degrees, and in post-processing in real time, the Apogee is 0.008. So if you put the Equinox plus Inertia, you will have an Apogee-like series with post-processing. That means that with the post-processing, you can choose exactly the product you want for your 80% jobs, then add inertia for your more demanding job. And that's going to be cheaper, that's going to be more flexible, and the price to performance ratio will be better. And at the end of the day, everybody will be happy. Let's say what we have, what is coming next, what we're gonna have for the futures. We are a bunch. We are 50 in the company. We are 30 at the R&D. So we are continuously improving our product, always working on new solutions, new stuff. And for example, we will output the native the Kongsberg KM binary for the Kongsberg multi-beam user. So that's going to be fully transparent. We will have as well an embedded N-trip, and a good point that we're going to have in native in all our product without any cost. PPP, PTP, and NTP protocol. So everything will be included in our hardware. And for the people that are doing photogrammetry, we will be able to do a inertia photogrammetries package in the coming months. So everything will be taken from the data, from the pictures timestamp to the output to the photogrammetry system. So everything will be included. We have people, we have well-experienced people that are in the technical support. So don't hesitate to call them. If there is any issue, they will be happy to give you advice on how to install the sensor, how to calibrate it, and so on. If you want to contact us, for people that doesn't know us, so for Denmark, Finland, and Sweden, you can contact Hydrocharting, Jesper. He will be the right contact for you. And from the lucky guys which are in UK, you can contact Swiss Services, and James will be very happy to give you advice on the products. And if you have any question, you can just send me a mail. If you want to have as well inertia post-processing demos or stuff like that, don't hesitate to contact us. We will be pleased to do that. We'll be pleased to do that for you. If you want to do trials as well, we have a pool of equipment. Don't hesitate to contact us. We're going to find a product for you, for a demo or for a trials. Here we go.
There, I even remembered to unmute my mic this time. Thank you so much, Sebastian. Great to hear from you. I appreciate you taking time out of your holiday to join us today. I can hear that you have your family in the background.
Yeah, actually at this time they're eating, so we are going to feed the monsters. But
keep them quiet. Awesome. Listen, I've got one question here, again from my question asking hero, Walter. How easy is it to align the IMU reference frame with the vessel frame? Do you need good dimensional control to tie it in properly to, for instance, the multi-beam reference frame? Or do you co-locate with the multi-beam?
You can basically, Walter, you can put the INS wherever you want, and just measure accurately from the INS to the multi-beam. That's the only stuff that you need to measure accurately, because the system gonna automatically compute from the system to the GPS antenna. So there is a calibration embedded, so there is nothing to worry on that side. So the only one that it's very important is to do one from the INS to the multi-beam. If you want to cross-check that, inertia will be able to recompute them as well. So it's very easy. Let's say for when we were allowed to go on trials, vessel mobilizations with our products took 3 hours. It can be very fast and very accurate. And we are talking about centimeter accuracy on the whole axis.
Great. Okay, that looks like the only question that I have for you. Thanks again. I hope you enjoy your dinner with your family. Really appreciate you calling in and joining us.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Okay, we are ready for our last presentation of the evening. Now we are jumping all the way from the French Alps to Houston, where Keith, welcome, has both power and heat, it would appear, given your short-sleeved shirt. How you doing?
Yep. Hi, good evening, good afternoon, good morning.
Depending on where you are in the world. Thanks for joining us all the way from Houston. I'm glad to see that you are safe and well from there. I got a little bio from you. It says here that you began in Wimpole in the early 80s working offshore before you moved into engineering support sales and then management at Sonardyne, Aplanix, and Geoacoustics. And in 2005, you formed Zupt and you have been there ever since. Yes?
Yep, that's about it.
All right. Well, take it away then. Thanks so much for joining us, Keith.
Hi, appreciate everybody sort of sticking around and staying online. I'm going to do my classic speed presenting, so I do apologize if I'm going too fast. I'm not going to present anything unless I can actually get the page to go down. There we go. I'm going to try and sort of fit two things into the time slot I've got. I'm going to talk about remote survey, remote metrology, following on from what Kevin was talking about. We're talking about remote metrology surveys. And then I want to share, we finally got permission to share some data that we recently collected with our system we call 3D Recon. And that follows on from last month's NOSP meeting where subsea modeling systems were being discussed. And I just wanted to share some of that data with you. It's kind of hot off the press, and share some of the performance capabilities of that system. When we talk about remote metrology, we are talking about only equipment being offshore, no survey personnel being offshore. And more, we're hearing from the operators that they want to see the removal of folks from vessels, if at all possible. And obviously, COVID's brought this home in a big way. We currently have folks sat in quarantine in Angola. We have people sat in quarantine around the world trying to get into projects. I just had a fun 10-day quarantine in Norway prior to doing some work there. So there's a cost associated with that. There's time associated with that. And if we can actually move to the state of providing services without people having to go to the field, then we would assume that the industry would be keen to adopt it. We're seeing some hesitance, which is why I'm chatting through this here again today. Very briefly, we've been doing inertial metrologies for, 12 years now. This slide will let you know roughly what we mean by doing a metrology with our inertial navigation system. It is a standalone inertial system. We align in one hub. We collect attitude data in both hubs. We then transit between hubs to do what we call position loops, where we update the system at hub A, move to hub B, take a fix, move back to hub A, take another fix. Now we've worked out where B is with respect to A. We do that a few times. We've got a spread of data for B with respect to A that's we want to be within 2/3 of the tolerance that the client's given us. Now we've got our horizontal vertical difference data. We've got our attitude data. We then do a bathy survey. We've completed a metrology. We've done something like 250 metrology somewhere in the world to date. So hopefully by now, folks can just accept this methodology and say, yeah, let's get on with it. Interestingly enough, we still see people say, well, is it mature? Well, after doing 250 and 250 jumpers fitting, one would hope that it is mature. What I'm talking about today, though, is the ability for us to do this remotely. And one of the pushbacks that we hear from people when we say we're going to do this type of work remotely, the sort of immediate reaction is, but bandwidth offshore doesn't work. Bandwidth offshore is unreliable. And I guess it's unreliable if you don't pay for it is one of the ways we'll respond to that. You can't sit at home on a dial-up connection binge watching Netflix. You've had to upgrade your bandwidth connection at the house. If the vessel operator or the client doesn't pay for bandwidth, then bandwidth will be an issue. But in nearly all cases, it is just a matter of pounds, euros, dollars, or something, because the bandwidth is available into the vessel, but it's just not being paid for. And what we're also finding is, over the years, bandwidth into vessels has become the sort of under the wing of IT groups, not operational groups. Therefore, IT departments within large organizations tend to be in business to stop other people getting into their networks and lock things down. So if you're trying to mobilize into a vessel and gain quick access to bandwidth, the last thing in the world these people want you doing is connecting into a switch and gaining access. We believe that for more remote operations to become more common, we're going to have to drag the control of bandwidth away from, or in partnership with, let's say that the nice way, but we have to drag the control to a certain extent away from the IT departments back into operations, because it is a huge operational saving and a huge operational efficiency if this bandwidth is made available. One of the take-home points I put in the middle of this slide is, if you want to upgrade the bandwidth on a vessel for a month, the cost to do that with most of the current day providers is less than the cost of 1 day of my surveyors being offshore. 1 day of one person being offshore, it costs less than that to upgrade the bandwidth to allow us to do a remote metrology for a month. Also, if we're talking about jumping into remote operations for call-out work, for short duration work, it can be quite daunting to actually get into an organization and find out who is actually responsible for connectivity into a vessel. I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent for a couple of slides and just talk about how this world is changing. I've updated these slides over the last sort of 6 to 9 to 12 months because this is a very, very dynamic space. So conventional geostationary orbit satellite vendors, the RigNets, the Speedcasts, etc., they're seeing a radical change in their market space, in their business space, to the extent that they're now trying to offer all additional services or other services, not basically just resellers of bandwidth. And what we're seeing is that sort of already, and then within the next 12 to 24 months, bandwidth via satellite link is going to tumble. In the classic example we all use is Starlink, SpaceX's Starlink service. So just checking to get an update before I presented this slide today, Starlink now has 951 operational SVs up and running. They have over 10,000 users actually in the UK, in North America, in Canada using their system. And these are static base stations primarily on houses. So I don't know what percentage of these users are in a dynamic mobile base station or a dynamic mobile terminal, but these guys are paying $99 a month and they're getting 100 megabits per second down and 20 megabits per second up. So this service isn't maturing, it has matured. And I think the intent is that with over 1,500 SVs launched by the end of this year, Starlink will be fully operational. And then there's Kuiper, and then there's all of the other services that are coming down the road from other vendors as well that are going to be offering this competitive bandwidth. Just back up 1 second. The great thing to remember is that with the LEO, with the low Earth orbiting services that these folks are bringing online, latency is really not an issue. If we talk about latency through a good geostationary connection, we're talking 600, 700, 800 milliseconds. We've actually done some remote metrology work where we've had latencies of 3 or 4 seconds. If we're talking about LEO, low Earth orbiting connectivity, we're talking about latency in the connection of between 30 and 50 milliseconds. So really not even noticeable latency. The hardware components of these systems are changing as well. So we're all very familiar with the large domes, the 2-meter domes, the 1.6-meter domes, etc., that we see on vessels that we work on offshore. We're now moving into an area. Originally, this was being driven by comms into aircraft for the modern day traveler in international aircraft, actually having full bandwidth connectivity. Obviously, COVID sort of put a full stop on that with the lack of international travel and even domestic travel to a certain extent with the airlines. So the vendors that were chasing the space of putting these flat panel antennas onto aircraft are now quickly sidestepping and making them available for use on vehicles, for use on vessels. And there's a bunch of them. ThinkCom, Kymeta, Phaser, they're all working in this space, and they're all combining all of the components that you need to have a dynamic package into something. The bottom right image here is perhaps 0.7 of a meter by 1.2 meters, and that's got everything you need for a dynamic platform in it to connect to a LEO constellation. We believe that very shortly, well, some folks are already doing this, most certainly Oceaneering are doing this with conventional equipment, and others are walking into the marketplace as well, but you're going to see short-term service providers, and by that I mean somebody turning up offshore to provide work over, say, a 2 or 3 or 1 or 2 week period, actually turning up and providing their own bandwidth, because the current situation and accessing bandwidth offshore can be such a pitfall that if we can turn up offshore, provide our own, and reliably deliver a service through it, we prefer to go that way. It is an affordable way to go. Kymeta already offer a dual antenna solution that allows you to, say, put a system in onto the top of and inside of a 6-foot shipping container that will give you dual redundant, just in case there's some multipath issues or some masking issues, a dual redundant connectivity capability through their flat panel technology. There are going to be issues that vessel operators and clients are going to have to become more and more familiar with, and I sort of suggest here where I think that clients are going to have to start thinking about the RF space like we've thought for the last 15, 20 years about the acoustic space under a vessel. They're going to have to manage the RF bandwidth or the RF spectrum the same way we manage the acoustic spectrum, or we did manage prior to wideband signals being far more common underneath vessels. But we believe that folks are going to turn up with their own capability offshore unless we can get operators and vessel operators making bandwidth readily available without a huge amount of hassle. So let's just quickly get back to remote metrology. By this, we mean no survey personnel offshore at all. We ship the equipment out. The equipment is tested prior to the day we do a metrology. The equipment stays on standby until it's time to do the work. We'll, when we test, we'll initially do a loopback test. Then we'll bring the system up, get ROV to take it up to the ROV deck, connect it up, do a test to our instrument from the beach. So the software we're using when we do this remote metrology work is exactly the same software that we'd be using if we were sat in the ROV control room or control van alongside the guys flying the vehicle. We'll bring that up on shore, do a full test to our instrument, and then when it's time, we'll actually get on with the metrology. ROV will have the task plan in front of them. We'll have a voice link, we'll have a video link, and we'll have a link to our instrument on the vehicle, and we'll complete the metrology. So we completed our first remote metrology back in 2017. To date, we've completed 14 remote metrologies. Also, just for interest's sake, we've also completed 3 remote buoy sets. So that's pre-spud buoy sets, 4 buoys in a pattern to allow the rig to come on location and spud the conductor into the seabed. So we can also do remote voice out work as well. The most recent we've done was in January of this year, January 2021. It's a very small footprint of equipment, a couple of C-pin system, a case with a tooling in it to actually lift the C-pins with the ROV, and stabs and rotating stab hardware to actually stab the systems into the hubs. Obviously, we need CTD if we're delivering bathymetry. If we're delivering absolute, then we need a barometer, and we obviously have a good pressure transducer in there, Digicort's pressure transducer in there. And depending on how we're doing the bathy survey, we prefer in all cases to step the bathy survey if we can with the Digicorts. But if the client insists we fly the bathy survey, then we'll do it with a real-time SVS giving us real-time speed of sound into an altimeter to give absolute bathy. That's the profile of the equipment. We connect C-pins up to the ROV, or ROV connects C-pins up to the ROV. It's a single connection, a single serial channel, RS-232, 38.4 kilobaud, 24 volts, 75 watts. In most instances, for most common vehicles, we already have pigtails made up to go into the vehicle. If not, we provide the cabling, both rubber and more often we use PBOF to allow ROV to make the cabling up into the ROV survey port, connect C-pins into the ROV, bring it up to the surface vessel, and then we take the surface vessel comms through the satellite link back to the office to complete the data collection in the office. Serial is fairly simple. We use a MOXA N port to convert the serial to an Ethernet server, so we can connect into an IP address, and it's a virtual serial port. So we're looking at that virtual serial port from the beach. Video, we'll either compress it ourselves and send it back over an H.265 encoded video link. In several cases today, we're seeing video being multicast. If the vessel is multicasting video, we do not need to bring video back to the beach. We just need to log into their portal and view the ROV video. And in most cases today, for voice, we're literally using an IP phone on the vessel. We'll either call in using the vessel's phone connection system, or we've got an IP phone that we can put through our remote rack. Fairly simple stuff, no real rocket science going on here, but just an ability to allow us to connect all the way back to the beach. Just the same as if we're doing a manned metrology, we have real-time quality control on the screens in front of us as we're collecting the data. So if you can see the screen in the bottom right-hand side, you're seeing the standard deviation in the northing and in the easting and in the depth of hub B versus hub A. You're seeing the standard deviation in heading, pitch, and roll. So we're seeing the quality of the data we're collecting as we collect it. And basically, this allows us to get the job done and not collect excess data if we don't need it, because we've already met the client's requirement and specification. Deliverables, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Normal metrology deliverables, we make what we call the ODEL, or the offshore deliverable, within 24 hours in most cases of finishing collecting data. In some instances, if clients want it, we'll make that deliverable within 12 hours. But we really need to think about that, because we want to make sure we do good QC on the final data set before we make that deliverable. Having done multiple remote metrologies now, the sorts of things that everybody thinks about is, yeah, there's a saving in price. There's obviously a saving in POB. But then the other subtle things that come out of this is there's a reduction in Hse risk. You've got less people out there. None of the personnel mobilization issues. We work in Angola currently, and it's one of the beautiful parts of the world where you work, where things like STVs, and currently with quarantine, PCR tests, 3 days, 2 days, 1 day before you're going to travel, baggage losses, just the fundamental hassle of getting people into some of these countries all goes away if you're doing this work remotely. A point to note here, there has been no issue or complication faced during a remote metrology job that we've completed to date that would have benefited from any one of our guys being offshore. Any issues we've had, the ROV guys have dealt with, just the same as if we're offshore. They would have probably dealt with them if we're out there anyway. And then one of the other sort of flexibility things this gives to the client is we're lump sum pricing this work, we're lump sum pricing metrologies. And if we're doing, say, a single metrology in the Gulf of Mexico, the client's got either a 15-day or a 30-day window to take this equipment and do the metrology when they want. And we have literally had the instance where the guys offshore have said, no, we're going to do the metrology tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Don't worry about it. And they've literally just planned it into their sequence because this was on a rig. They knew the vehicle on the rig was going to be available at that time. So the client can do the metrology when they want to do it. They do not feel rushed into it because they've got high day rate people sat around their ankles offshore waiting to get the work done. And then also equipment demobilization. There's no rush for them to demob it, so they don't have to get a vessel out to the field to pick it up as soon as possible because they've got time to get that equipment back into us. This is a sort of timeline for a Gulf of Mexico remote metrology. We'll ship the equipment out 10 days out. We'll do an interface test 24 hours out just to make sure everything's working. We'll do the metrology, we'll deliver the report, and we'll get the equipment back when we get the equipment back. This equipment is ITAR controlled. We have export licenses that state it's correct to ship it without a US person sitting on top of it. So both domestically here in the States, we actually export equipment out into the Gulf of Mexico because we don't know what vessels it's going on to get there. Same as international work. So we actually rent inertial backpacks into land seismic crews. We've been doing that for the last 12, 14 years as well. So renting inertial equipment under an ITAR DSP 73 is not an issue. I'm going to quickly run on to 3D Recon because I want to show you some of this data we collected. And then hopefully at the end, I'm going to shut this screen down and open up Cloud Compare and hope that my laptop doesn't die on me, which it did earlier on when I did this, just to show you some of the data in detail. So 3D Recon is a multi-camera IMU model generating subsea positioning tool. And we think these are some of the applications that are appropriate for 3D Recon. Many of you or most of you may have heard us talk about this before. This is the same type of capability that Comex in their Aurus 3D, the same type of capability that Rovco are talking about, same type of capability that others are talking about. This is just Zup's version we've developed in the particular way we've developed it. We've put IMUs in there for particular reasons, which I'll come on into a second. But interestingly enough, we're seeing the initial take-up of this technology primarily for the precise positioning of the ROV and hence the sensors bolted to the ROV with regard to the structure in contactless CP applications, contactless cathodic potential applications. So on the right, you see the real thing. On the left, you see a cutaway CAD drawing, 3 cameras, 2 lights. We actually have a laser that we really don't use, but we can use if we need to. Those three cameras, are on 15 centimeter baseline. So we've got a 15 centimeter and a 30 centimeter baseline. We actually developed the lights ourselves because we want to make sure that we have very balanced illumination in the scene that we're looking at. And this slide will put you to sleep really fast, but this slide shows you exactly what we're doing within the system and within the topside software. We have both a copper gigabit Ethernet out of this system, and we have fiber out. To date, we've only used the system with copper out. And with the gigabit limit, 1 gigabit limit, we can do about 5 frames per second for the 3 cameras, plus the IMU data, plus control coming to the surface over that connection. So we've used this on an RTS and a Nova Mux. It tests and works fine, pulling that gigabit connection to the surface. The left-hand side of this graphic shows you the data flow for the imagery. We rectify, we then do feature detection and description. We match those features. We work out where that point in space is in front of the camera baseline. We do lever arm adjustments, and then we hand over 1 of 2 point clouds. We generate a sparse point cloud that is used for navigation and assisting the navigation and the pose estimation between frames. That goes over to the right-hand side of this diagram. And the dense point cloud is the deliverable that I'm going to show you an example of in a minute. On the IMU side of things, we've got a normal inertial propagator taking delta V, delta theta and running that propagator, we then use global feature matches and SLAM updates and things like bundle adjustments and loop closures to improve the positioning of the overall solution. And in that navigation component of the solution, we can also bring in, as we did in the data set example I'll show you in a second, we can bring in external nav. So if you've got a Rovins or a Sprint solution or a ZUP solution on board the vehicle that is a USBL smoothing solution, a sparse LBL or an LBL aided inertial solution, we can bring that in to take us into absolute position space, or we can just work in a local reference space. Out of this solution comes the high resolution 3D model, and quite importantly for several of the applications we're looking at, out of this solution in real time comes a very precise position of 3D Recon, and hence the ROV that it's bolted to, so we can generate this UTC time tag string that's going to a contactless CP system or a similar sensor. The sparse point cloud is generated purely for positioning. The dense point cloud is not in real time yet. We're still not quite there with generating the dense point cloud in real time. I would suggest the dense point cloud at the moment would be something like 2 to 3 hours offset from real time. But once we've set the system up and got it rolling, we'll be generating it in similar time to real-time data acquisition. So you won't be getting a dense point cloud sort of 3 to 4 months after we've collected the data. You should be getting the dense point cloud within days of collecting the data. We generate a mesh, we generate a point cloud, we can make these deliverables in many different formats for you. This is just a test frame on the floor in the shop just to show you what simple data sets look like. The accuracy of the data set, we're still not quite sure yet, but we think we're 1 in 1,000. So obviously over a 10-meter distance, we think the accuracy of the scaling of the model that we've generated should be on the order of 10 millimeters, 30 meters, 30 millimeters, et cetera, et cetera. We require a checkerboard target to be deployed on site at the beginning of our dive. We check our calibration at the beginning of the dive, check our cal at the end of the dive, and that's what gives us the confidence in actually claiming and confirming these accuracies. Camera calibrations, camera-to-camera calibrations, and camera-to-IMU calibrations are basically factory calibrations or in-pool calibrations prior to the system going to the field. Why is an IMU within the camera baseline fairly critical? What it does, it allows us to slow down the frame rate. If we're just doing pose estimates between one frame grab to the next frame grab to the next frame grab, if we're doing that pose estimate based on imagery alone, we need something like 20 frames per second. 20 frames per second means a lot of bandwidth. It means probably a 5 gig link into a huge processing bundle on the vehicle or a 5 gig fiber link to the surface. The IMU allows us to slow down that frame rate. As I say, we're running between 5 and 7 frames per second. And the pose estimate, so if I grab a frame here, and I grab a frame here, and I grab a frame further out, I can work out what the pose estimate is by using the IMU data in that 200 milliseconds at 5 frames per second. That's every 200 milliseconds. I know very precisely the way the camera has moved over that 200 millisecond period. It also allows us to do things like ransack, to get rid of false features more accurately and quickly. And it allows us to just about, I've sort of modified this slide because originally it said it allows us to lose imagery. No, you can't lose imagery totally. Let's say the ROV kicks up significant particulate matter and you're just in a cloud and you've lost all of the static features that you're looking at because you can't see them for particulate matter, then our SLAM solution fails. As long as I've got some components of the field of view of the camera with some of that static imagery in it, which I can still do feature detects on, then I do not lose my SLAM solution. It's a very useful capability to have in the baseline. We think it's fairly critical. So DOF Subsea very kindly got us involved in a project that kicked off last March in Australia. We turned up in Australia, we mobilized the system, and then everybody was sent home because of the thing that we know that's going on that everybody's suffering from. So March turned into October. The data collection was moved from Australia to the Gulf of Mexico, and we headed offshore October last year. I'm just going to give you a couple of snippets of this because we're running out of time. This is a PLET. This is a screen grab of the 3D model of the PLET. I'll try and show you some of the sort of detail we're seeing on it. Again, this is we use this sort of silly term, but it's a geospatially scaled, correct model of what we're looking at. So you can make measurements in this model. You can make angle measurements, distance measurements, volume measurements. So for inspectors, obviously they're interested in things like anode volumes, anode volumetrics. What's the depletion like of particular anodes, or the pluming of an anode? Obviously, for areas of corrosion, folks are interested in how large is that area of corrosion, what's going on with that. So this is a color palletized mesh. If my system doesn't crash, I'll try and show you the point cloud here in a sec as well. But there's a lot of resolution in this. This is a section of pipeline. We basically had a period of about a day and a half at the end of a project that DOF were involved in, where we had 2 dives to collect this data, and sort of bear with us, because this is the first time that 3D Recon has gone to depth offshore for real, apart from in lakes and in pools ever. So this is the data sets we collected in those 2 dives and cleaned up. But again, here you've got this very small free span. These crabs have been digging a hole out, but you've actually got real scale data where you can scale off that free span. I'm going to try and load up the model. I'm going to stop sharing this screen, load up the cloud compare, and Selena, if I disappear, that's why. So let me just come back in. Excuse me 1 second. I'll try and make this as quick as possible. I'm just moving what I need over to the screen. Okay. So if you could enable that second screen. There we go. So now let me try and manipulate my mouse isn't going. Here we go. So this is the PLET model in Cloud Compare. Cloud Compare is a free viewer that anybody can download. It shows you the level of points within the point cloud. You can zoom in and look at, I think we've got some text over here that shows you the level of resolution that we're actually seeing in the imagery and in the mesh. I'm sorry. You can keep going on in and see things like shackles in these pad eyes, and you can make some measurements. I won't spend a lot of time messing around in this data set, but it just, for us, for a first time at depth, it sort of finally gave us some hope that we believe this type of a tool, again, others are offering something similar to this, but this type of a tool is a very powerful tool to allow us to do IM work, to allow us to do either position the ROV to collect a heat map of the CP, say, of this particular structure, or to go in there and look at what an IM surveyor or IM inspector or engineer would want to see on that particular structure. I'll leave it there, Selena.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Keith. And I'm glad that it worked here with seeing the point cloud at the end of the day. Was worried we were going to lose you.
So was I.
Great. All right. I have one question for you before I move over to the questions in the chat room, because you spoke a little bit about how, of course, if you don't have bandwidth, it's not going to work. So pay for bandwidth. And I really like that message. And I like your parallel also to the way that we've all upgraded our expectations at home. So why haven't we upgraded our expectations offshore? But what is really the minimum bandwidth you need in order to do this work remotely?
So we're now, I don't mean to be too commercial, but we're now actually getting interest from some of the survey contractors that have what we would call online surveys on board the vessel. If a survey contractor's got an onboard survey on board the vessel, we need no bandwidth, because we can get them to walk through the task plan, collect the data, send us via email a file we call the oplog file, and we can QC stuff in real time while they collect data. If we're dealing with just ROV personnel offshore, where we really need to be seeing what's going on and actually checking the data in real time, in all honesty, if the video's not being multicast, if we've got to provide the video, the voice, and the instrument connectivity, the minimum we can live with is 512 from the vessel to the beach and 128 up. So that's a CIR, committed information rate, 512, 128. In all honesty, to buy a megabit per second is the number I put in the middle of the presentation, about $1,500 a month. So really, there's no reason why somebody can't up their bandwidth by 1 megabit per second for $1,600 a month to get a megabit per second down. And all we really need going back from the beach to the vessel, which is actually the easy way to go as far as the satellite guys are concerned, is 128, because we're just connecting into the serial link primarily with a bit of voice.
Mm. Yeah. Okay, awesome. I also have a question here, again from Walter. He says...
Hi, Walter.
I know. He says he's going for the hat trick here in this message. And what I really love this question. I would not have thought of this myself. It's an awesome question with a perspective of our people that we need to take care of. And he says, what kind of personnel do you use for the technical work onshore, the surveyors, engineers, data scientists? Do they have to have offshore operational experience? And if so, how are we going to achieve that in the future? Because if we're moving
at the moment, because I'm going to get on my soapbox again here, it seems incredibly difficult to get the operators that claim they want to work remotely to accept remote services. So at the moment, we're still spending a large amount of our time going offshore and doing it. So the guys that are sitting around the bench here in the office when we do remote work are guys that work offshore. In 1, 2, 3 years' time, I still think there will be people going offshore to do some tasks. Maybe we'll be going offshore to do the first of a sequence of metrologies to get the ROV guys familiar with what's going on, and then we'll drop back and just let them do the rest of the work. So in that instance, I still think we'll have folks that have familiarity with the offshore world. I think you're always going to need that level of engineering support and that level of survey support. So currently we use offshore surveyors, and we sort of feed our offshore surveyors either from folks that have been to a survey school or folks that have got an undergraduate degree in mechanical electrical engineering, and then we bring them up to speed on the survey components, or the surveyors we bring up to speed on the engineering components.
I see. Let's see. Damien asks, are you able to then apply computer vision to the images to automatically identify anomalies?
Damien, thank you so much for your question. Am I able, just read that to me again, just to make sure I try and answer that properly.
He says, are you able to then apply computer vision to the images? Oh no, and then my computer died. No, it didn't. It's fine. Sorry, I'll start again. Are you able to then apply computer vision to the images to automatically identify anomalies? And how do you perform QC during data acquisition?
So for Damien's talking about the 3D reconstruction models that we're building, obviously. So once you've got the imagery, the model is generated from the imagery. Once you've got imagery, I hate to go down this path because I think people use these buzz terms far too easily, but you've got AI, you've got machine learning. So if you train your solution as to what an anomaly is, absolutely the system can then detect and identify those anomalies. So initially, we'd like to be able to do things like automated change detection. So maybe not even detecting a specific anomaly, but just detecting from this data set to this data set, there's a change. Now somebody go automatically, there's a change. Now somebody go in there and actually try and look and see why that change has occurred from 6 months ago to now, or 2 years ago to now. On the second part of that question, we, after our first trip offshore, we learned a heck of a lot of lessons, and really we should have known some of the lessons before we learnt them. Sort of going back to Kevin's commentary earlier on, you think you know what you're doing, then suddenly you realize that, well, you thought you knew, but now you've just learned it again. Planning, planning, planning. So actually what we're doing at the moment is we're starting the development of a tool in the gaming engine Unreal to actually import the structures that we're going to be collecting data on subsea into Unreal. We've built a model of 3D Recon in the physics engine of Unreal, the 3 cameras, the 2 lights, so that we can actually pre-plan the trajectory of the ROV to make sure that we've got the coverage and the overlap that we want. And then we actually want to develop that tool such that the real-time navigation string coming out of 3D Recon can actually plug into an online version of that Unreal tool and actually paint the structure green, let's say, to prove to ourselves that we've actually collected all the data that we need to have collected, and we've got no voids or no gaps in the data set. So still a work in progress, still something that we're going to have to spend some time on. But we believe that planning and the real-time QC component of collecting this 3D model or this mesh data set is critical to make sure that once you've left the field, you've got in the can, so to speak, the data set you need to actually generate all the deliverables that inspectors and other folks want.
Awesome. Let's see, there's one more question here. It's a tricky one, and the industry needs to think carefully about how remote operations is going to work 2 to 5 years from now as offshore operational experience starts to reduce. Sorry, this was a follow-on from Walter's previous question about what happens when we're doing everything onshore. Do those people need to have ever been offshore in their lives, or can they really do all the support work without that real-time experience?
I think practically, so in our case, we want the ROV guys to mobilize our system to the ROV, because we've got stuff in a Pelican case and it isn't going to get itself out of a Pelican case, get itself onto the ROV deck and connect into the ROV. So the ROV guys, I think you're going to find an added level of skill set. Not that these guys don't have it today, but if we turn up on a rig, there's a very different level of quality of ROV personnel on a rig than there is, say, on a vessel that does a lot of survey work and survey type intervention work, installation work. So the ROV guys are going to have to become a little bit more broad in their capabilities. But then the guys on shore, as long as they've got the survey and the engineering skills that can be trained, maybe they don't need 20 years or 5 years worth of experience offshore, because they're basically looking at data. And as long as they can import that data, test and check that data, it's like everything else in life. As long as everything's working, it's going to be okay. It's when things stop working that experience of being offshore will help. And really, it's when the competency on the crew out there that actually interfacing the equipment in doing, say, a loopback test, if they can't find a serial port that works on the ROV, then we've got problems. So I'm not quite sure I've answered Walter's question. I think we will get used to the fact that people will be running these systems without offshore experience, but the transition will be with people that do have it.
Well, it seems like there's a trend, not just in this industry, but in every industry, where the more automated things become and the higher quality data you're collecting, the less need for expertise there becomes also. So you are able to do with people who don't, as you say, have the 20 years behind them.
In designing the system, so you've got the quality and the quality metrics within the system, so you know that the solution is good, is a fundamental part of the solution as well.
Great. Okay, I think that just about does it for us. You, I'm sure, are ready for your lunch.
Yep.
The rest of us are either having already fed our kids or need to get busy to take care of our evenings. Thank you so much for being with us today, Keith. It's been much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, that is it. That concludes today's event. I want to thank Nikki Nichols from Andrew Survey and Stuart Duncan from DOF Subsea in particular, who have been in the chat room, making sure that everything is okay on behalf of both the Hydrographic Society of Scotland and the Norwegian Forum for Offshore Survey and Positioning. Thank you also to all of you who have been watching. We've had a steady stream of 60 to 80 people joining the live stream today, and about half that in the chat room. Which is much appreciated as always, because it is for you that we exist and for you that we arrange all of these events. Please, again, if your company is on this list, thank you so much for your support. I hope you will encourage them to also give their support to us in 2021. If they're not on the list, you should ask them why and try to give them a nudge in the right direction, because once we get back up and running in physical gatherings again, we would like to have a proper party and invite all of you to that. So I hope to see everybody live and in person in 2021. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a lovely evening or afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. All the best.